are in a preaching series entitled, Why Do I Do What I Don't Want to Do? That's the title of the preaching series that we are in. This is the third week of that series. And as Christians and followers of Jesus, we are called to live holy, righteous lives. Lives that are set apart from the rest of culture and society. Lives that are full of the Holy Spirit. And yet the reality is, if we look back over our lives, we see many things that we do that we didn't want to do. Things which were wrong, things which were harmful, things which ultimately were not good for us. And yet, for whatever reason, we still did them. And here's the core verse of our series. Romans 7, verse 19. This is what the Apostle Paul says. Come up on the screen. That's not the right, I don't think we're on the right one. That's, I think, last week's one. Okay, Romans 7 and verse 19, which basically says, why do I do what I don't want to do? Why do I do the evil that I don't want to do? And I think the reality is that we can all kind of link in and agree with the Apostle Paul in those words. Why do I do things in my life that I don't want to do? And two pieces of wisdom that I've been sharing each week in this series that I've noticed in my life and as a pastor of a church for 13 years is, number one, sin subtly creeps in. Little by little, slowly it creeps in. And secondly, we all love quick fixes, but pursuing holiness is a lifelong pursuit full of thousands of decisions along the way. There's no cruise control in Christianity. I think we all wish there was. There was a cruise control that we just flip a switch and we are online with Jesus. And we don't need to do anything else. We don't need to realign anything else, but we're all good to go. And think of it like this. I used this illustration a couple of weeks ago, right at the end of the message, but think of it like this. You're driving your car. And you're driving down the middle lane of the motorway. I don't suggest that you do this, but if you take your hands off the wheel, over time, the car will drift to the left or to the right. If you don't have your hands on the steering wheel, if you're not realigning yourself with the plans and purposes of God, you will drift into sin. You will drift into folly. You will drift into bad habits. It's having your hand on the steering wheel, keeping aligned to the word of God, keeping going with praying to the Lord on a regular basis, gathering as God's people to worship together, having accountability with brothers and sisters in Christ, being part of community, God's people. All of these things help us to keep our eyes on Jesus. They help us to keep from drifting and keep from falling into sin. And the tool that I'm giving you in this series is a very simple one, but a very important one. The tool is this: you cannot stop a bad habit. You can only replace it with a good one. That is the key fundamental message of this series. And what we are doing is looking at a different number of vices or sins that seem to trip us up again and again, year after year. But along with each vice and each sin, there is a corresponding solution and virtue. So far, the last couple of weeks, we firstly looked at pride as a sin and a vice that can trip us up. But the solution, the virtue, is humility. Last week, we looked at greed, and the corresponding solution, virtue, is generosity. Today, we're going to look at busyness and rest. Now, let me ask you a question. How do you do your calendar? How do you do planning ahead? You know, some of you out there, you are planners. You just love it. You love a good spreadsheet. You love a good diary, or you love to get your phone out and put in everything you're doing with the different colors. You just love it. Others of you, you don't know what you're doing this afternoon. Okay? You have no idea what's happening tomorrow, and next week is a mystery. Okay? You know, some of you will say, well, I know what I'm doing on the 4th of September, 2025. And others of you wouldn't have a clue. I'll be honest, this is not a strength of mine, although the only slight caveat would be I think I've got a little bit better than what I used to be. My wife, Jen, is in the room, so, you know, I'm saying this in an incredible amount of trepidation. But, you know, we try as a couple, me and Jen, we try to plan ahead a bit. Try and plan ahead for what might be happening the next month or into the summer or into the autumn to varying degrees of success. But you know what happens, don't you? You get things in place. You think, yep, we're all sorted. The planner looks great. The diary looks great. And then something gets cancelled. And then a new opportunity comes up. And then a meeting gets moved and the whole thing gets out of sync. The dictionary definition of busyness is the state of having or being involved in many activities. And here's what I want to put to you this morning, that busyness is seen as a permissible sin. And we let it creep into our lives. And if we're honest, most of us don't see it as a big deal. It's almost just an accepted given of modern life. And if we really want to push it a little bit further, most of us wear the badge of busyness as a badge of honor. In other words, how are you doing? I'm busy, man. I'm doing good. I'm busy. You see, the busyness that we all will face, the busyness is throughout the generations. You can be busy as a university student, busy as a young adult, busy as a single, busy as a newlywed, busy as a family of 1, 2, 3, 4, however many children you may have. You can be busy once you retire. Busyness is not about a particular stage of life. Like I mentioned already, I'm married to Jen, and we have 3 children, Grace, Amelia, and Levi. And so between the 5 of us, you're juggling all kinds of things. You're juggling the kids and their commitments, sports clubs and drama rehearsals. You're juggling taking them to school and picking them up. You're juggling work commitments. You're juggling seeing your extended family, and some of them may be unwell, and you need to go and visit them and care for them. You're juggling seeing friends that you haven't seen for months or years. You're juggling meetings in your diary. You're juggling, in my case, sermon preparation. You're juggling listening to the latest transfer news about whether Spurs have signed a player. You know, you're juggling all these things, and there's just not enough hours in the week. The hours seem to disappear quickly. You think about your life, all the to-do lists, all the pressures and all the commitments. And here's the grim reality. I don't like myself when I'm busy. I become a version of myself that I'm not proud of when I'm busy. And my hunch is that I wouldn't like you when you're busy. Okay, I wouldn't like you if you're frazzled and busy, because there'd be certain traits and things that would happen that would come to the front when you are in a state of busyness. Because when I'm busy, I focus on the worries and cares of life. I lack compassion. I don't love people well. I lose empathy and have no time to care for people. But above all else, when I am busy, I lose my own peace and joy. And what happens is we take on, in our busyness, a victim mentality. Because when someone comes up to you and you're busy and they ask you a question, you're like, can't you see I'm busy? You need to understand I'm busy. I can't help you. I can't do this. Kids, you can't have my help. You can't have my time. I can't get this done, that done, because I am busy. And so often we turn and we lash out on those around us because we are busy. We've got to discipline ourselves. We've got to be able to say no to certain things, even good things. Let me read you a quote by a Christian writer called Andy Crouch, which is brilliantly put. I have to say no to requests many times a day. Almost always people are understanding. They often say, oh, I know you are very busy. The truth is, I am not very busy. I try not to be busy at all. But in order for that to be true, I have to say no many, many times a day. Now, here's what I want to challenge you with today. I do believe that busyness is a tool of the enemy to kill our intimacy with Jesus. So we're going to look at what the Bible has to say about this. Now, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, Luke talks a lot about busyness. And the order of what comes in Luke chapter 10 is very significant. So Luke chapter 10, verse 1 to 13, Jesus sends out the 72 disciples. And within that, he sends them out with margin. He sends them out with margin to spend time with people, to go to villages and towns and stay there. But also, if things aren't working out, to move on and go somewhere else. So there's a sending out of the 72. Then a little bit later in Luke chapter 10, there is the parable of the Good Samaritan, verses 25 to 37. Now, the parable of the Good Samaritan teaches us so much on so many levels, but it is a story of margin. Because the priest walks by the injured man and he's busy and he doesn't stop because he's got no time. And the Levite walks by the injured man, but he doesn't stop because he's got no time. But the Samaritan comes along, he stops, he saves the man, looks after the man, takes him to the inn, pays, and he changes all of his plans, and he gives his time to care for that injured man. It's a story of margins, it's a story of many other things as well, but it's a story of having time to care for someone, having time to go and out of your way, change your plans, and put someone else's needs above your own. And then we come in Luke chapter 10 to the story of Mary and Martha, verses 38 to 42. Let me read these verses. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. So Jesus comes into town, and he's hanging out with his friends. Mary and Martha are Jesus' friends. And Martha is all action. She's the perfectionist. She's the homeowner. She's trying to get everything set up. She was trying to get the food ready. She's trying to get the house swept and clean. She's trying to make sure that all the best ornaments are lined up symmetrically so that Jesus can see the beauty of her home. And she gets very angry and upset with her friend Mary. Because Mary is the chilled one. Mary is the creative type, perhaps, the unpredictable type. She's just happy to hang out at Martha's house because Martha's got it all together and she can just enjoy time with Jesus. And to the Marthas of the world, Mary was very annoying. It seemed like she got a free pass. She's like, Jesus, just tell Mary to do something. Tell Mary to help me. And what does Jesus say? She's done what's better. I mean, you can hear Martha kind of spluttering, going, what? That's not fair. What? I'm doing all the work. I'm sorting everything out. And yet Mary's getting kind of accredited and bigged up by Jesus. But Jesus firmly puts Martha in her place. He says, Martha, you're being distracted by preparation. You're being distracted by perfectionism, by keeping all the plates spinning. Mary has done a better thing. Mary has prioritized. Mary has spent time in my presence at my feet with no other clutter and no other worries and care and anxiety. You see, Jesus was right in front of Martha, but her mind was elsewhere. Physically, she was right in the presence of the Son of God, but her mind was elsewhere. So I want to look at 3 things that busyness robs us of. This is really important, and I do believe this is very, very pertinent for our day in 2023. Firstly, busyness robs you of focus. Let me give you an example from everyday life that I'm pretty sure you can all relate to. You're gathering for a meal. Let's just take it. It's my family. It's Jen. It's my 3 kids. We've got dinner together. We're all going to come and sit around the table. The food's ready. The food's on the table. The table is set. Everyone's there to chat and everyone's there to catch up on their day. And someone's maybe just about to pray for the food and thank God for his goodness to us. And then, beep, 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 beep. Oh, better check that. Better check that text, better check that message, better check that call, better check that notification. I'll be right back. Off I go to check my phone. Oh, someone needs me. I need to reply to that straight away. It's really important. There's a problem. I need to try and sort it out. I need to fix it. Someone's really in need. I need to help them. I need to give this number. I need to tell them what to do. I go off and do that, and then I come back to the table. I'm back, guys. Time to eat, time to tuck in. But I'm not back because my head is elsewhere. My head is thinking about the message. My head is thinking about the call. My head is thinking about the notification. My head is all over the place. I mean, how many times do each of us do a version of that each and every day? Whether we're in a meeting at work, whether we're having a coffee with a friend, whether we're at church, whether we're in community group, whether we're just hanging out with our spouse or our kids or our best friend. You see, if we're open to distraction, it robs us of the ability to be fully present in any one moment. And that's why I think distraction of that kind, distraction is far more dangerous than we think. It's far more dangerous to our walk with Jesus than we actually give it credit to be. Let me ask you a question. What are the things that only you can do as a follower of Jesus? What are you uniquely gifted and qualified to do? Do you know, firstly and foremostly, you and I, we are called to grow our relationship with Jesus. And no one else can do that for you. You sometimes hear Christians say, oh, I don't feel like I'm growing. I don't feel like I'm maturing in my faith. Well, let me tell you, the only person who is responsible for what you are eating, for the spiritual food that you are eating, for what you are feeding your mind upon, the only person who's responsible for that is you. You are responsible for your own spiritual growth and development. And distraction is a massive enemy to you growing in your spiritual growth. And then depending on your stage of life, depending on where you are in your family or in your age, or there's no one else who is the mother and the father to your children. There's no one else who is the husband or the wife to your spouse. And there are jobs that you do, whether work, paid jobs or ministry jobs in the life of the church, that uniquely you are qualified to do. You see, I want you to see that busyness and distractions rob you of focusing on what matters most. What matters most? Your relationship with Jesus, your role as a spouse, as a parent, and your role as a friend to those around you, and the unique calling on your life. Distraction is an enemy to all of those things. Busyness and distraction take away from your effectiveness and your growth in all of those areas. Secondly, busyness robs us of empathy. Martha says to Jesus, "Don't you care?" You see, Martha feels like she's a victim. She feels like Mary's against her, and she feels like Jesus is against her. You see, she feels like she's on her own. She's carrying everything. She's trying to do everything, and everyone is against her. Busyness just leads to this victim mentality. We see life through a lens that says, well, if you're not helping me get this done, then you're not for me. You're against me. You don't like me. You don't want to help me or encourage me. You're no use to me. You become uninterested in other people. You don't care what's going on in other people's lives because you see no benefit to your to-do list getting done. Empathy takes time. We run at such a frantic pace in life sometimes that there's no extra time. It's why that the story of Mary and Martha is there next to the parable of the Good Samaritan. Remember, the priest, he had no time. He had religious things to do. The Levite had no time. He had things to do and places to go. It was only the Samaritan who stopped because there was an empathy to the victim, the man there battered and bruised on the side of the road. And he got it. He had empathy and he changed his plans. I wonder, are we slaves to what needs to be done? Are we slaves to our to-do list and getting everything done? But what about if it does not get done, but we serve and we love those around us? You see, again, I think we buy into this lie that busyness is a badge of honor. If people know I'm busy, they know I'm important. That's what we subconsciously think. The reality might be something more like this. I'm busy because I manage my time poorly. I'm busy because I'm X amount of years old, but I haven't learned to say no. I'm busy because I'm slave to what other people think of me, and I don't want to disappoint them. So busyness robs us of empathy. Thirdly, finally, busyness robs us of peace and joy. Verse 41, Martha. Martha is worried and upset about many things. Jesus notices that Martha has no peace and no joy. The Son of God is in her midst. The Son of God is in her home, and what is she thinking of? She's worried. She's thinking about what needs to be done. She's upset. She has no peace. Do you know the best way of dealing with what if? What if the house doesn't get clean and people come round? What if I don't finish my work on time and meet the deadline? What if I don't get my essay in time? Do you know the best way to deal with the what if? The best thing to do is to answer it. What if my house doesn't get clean before people come round? You'll have a messy house. What if I don't get my assignment done in time? I might lose a few marks. You see, the best way mentally to deal with the busyness, the what if, the kind of the fear of getting things wrong or the fear of not kind of walking up to that mark is to answer the what if, to brutally answer that what if. Life is busy. That is a reality of modern day life. And just one thing that's quite funny is, people always think that the next stage of life will be less busy, but it never is. Your responsibilities nearly always grow as you go through life. And so with responsibilities comes the need to manage your time far better than you did in the early years of your life. Now, the world has a lot to say about this issue, and a lot of it is good. The world has lots of resources around busyness. You go to any bookshop, you'll find kind of the self-help area, or you'll find how to deal with busyness. Because what the world nearly always says is, if your schedule is full, build some margin. Create some margin. Now, margin is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, it's a good thing. Look at what Luke 10 said about the parable of the Good Samaritan. When life throws you a curveball, when a disaster comes, when something comes out of nowhere, you want to have time to deal with that. Having margin in your week, having margin in your life is a good thing. We see that from the parable of the Good Samaritan. But the problem is that building a lifetime of margin is not sustainable. A better way of thinking about it, which is what Jesus talks about, is prioritization. That's what Jesus is talking about with Mary and Martha. It's not about margin, it's about what is your priority. Is your priority Jesus, or is your priority the cares and worries of this world? The question we need to ask ourselves is, well, what are my non-negotiables? What will I not trade in or move? What do I need to do to make this happen? Martin Luther, who was a theological great of a few centuries ago, he said this. He was a busy man. He preached, he wrote, he led a church. He wrote this. He said, I have so much to do today that I'm going to need to spend 3 hours in prayer in order to get it all done. What's he doing? He's prioritizing. He's prioritizing his non-negotiables. He's saying, this is so important to me, spending time with God, prayer, that I will prioritize it. In fact, give it more time in order to get everything that needs to be done. Let me tell you 3 things that are true of all of us. Everyone has a different capacity. Different ones of you carry different loads. It's why it's dangerous to compare. You cannot compare to the person sitting to your left and your right, how busy your life is, the responsibilities you carry, because everyone has a different capacity. Secondly, everyone has the same amount of time in a day. There are 24 hours in a day. You cannot change to that. You cannot add to that. And thirdly, anything you put as a priority over learning from Jesus is a bad trade. However good that thing may seem, it's a bad trade. Now, I want to bring this to a close. I've deliberately spent a lot of time looking at busyness and looking at the challenges that it brings, because I do think it's a real area of challenge in modern day life. But remember what we said, the tool I want to give you is in order to deal with busyness, you've got to replace it with another habit. And the habit is rest. Take away busyness, put in rest. Now, the dictionary says that rest is to cease from work in order to recover strength. But I think biblically is far more than that. Now, you see, this area of busyness and rest is a real battle for our souls. Because the aim is not an empty calendar. That's not the aim. Loads of time to do nothing. That's not the aim. The aim is a focused calendar on the tasks that God has given us. Now, let me help you and unpick for a moment a right understanding of rest. I wonder, what makes you love God more? What grows and develops your relationship with God? There's no right or wrong answer here. Everyone will answer slightly differently depending on personality. Is it time in nature? Does that do your soul good? Does that do your relationship good that you can praise the Creator God? Is it time reading your Bible? Is it time spent in the Word of God? Does that grow your love for Him? Is it times of worship, either corporate worship or worship on your own in the car with your earpods in and walking down the street? You're worshiping and it does you good and it grows your relationship and your heart kind of sings as you worship. Is it fellowship with other believers, brothers and sisters in Christ who can encourage you, who can put an arm around you, who can laugh with you, who can pray for you? It's probably a combination of many of those aspects. But I wonder, what makes you love God more? Because this is important. I want you to reframe rest. Reframe in your mind what is rest. You see, the problem is many of us think rest is watching a film or watching the latest Netflix series. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing to do. Take some time out and do something like that. Watch a game of football or whatever it is. But that's not rest, true rest, that stirs your soul and stirs your love for God. It doesn't help you to get to know God better and to find confidence in Him. That's what true rest is. And I think what happens is Christians have this tendency to put all rest together. Well, rest is an extra bit of sleep. And rest is watching a film. And rest is watching a game of football. Or rest is going to an art gallery. Or whatever it may be. And all those things do have a place to enjoy the things of this life. But that is not rest that restores our soul. That is not rest that grows our relationship with Jesus. That is not rest that grows our confidence in Him. King David talks about rest that comes from our souls finding confidence in God. Look at Psalm 62, verse 1-2. This is King David speaking. Truly, my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from Him. Truly, He is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. My soul finds rest in God. Like, again, you hear rest, you think, oh, what is he doing? Lying down? Chilling out? No. He's saying his soul finds rest in confidence in knowing who God is. His soul finds rest in knowing what God has done for him past and what God will do for him future. And for David, there is rest in knowing that God is his rock and his fortress, and he will never be shaken. You see, these are the truths that we need to feed our hearts and our minds on. Verse 7 and 8 of the same Psalm, Psalm 62. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. David's calling out to God as his refuge, a place where he finds his heart is fulfilled and he finds his soul is restored. A refuge is a place you go to in a time of pain and a time of sorrow, a time of suffering and a time of turmoil. You go to a refuge, and God is our refuge. If we go to him, we will find true rest. Lord, you are my refuge. I come to you to find rest. And here's the challenge, you see. The challenge in a busy life. The challenge in the many demands of our life. To discipline and to devote ourselves to true rest and restoration. And if I'm honest, and I will turn up the mirror and look at it myself, I think, well, I put in some rest in my week because there's times when I'm not working or I'm not kind of engaging with the many activities of life and family and work. And that's great and that's good. But those times are not always true times of rest when my soul is restored. Our souls need to find rest in God. Because when we get busy, we get self-reliant. When we get busy, we get self-dependence. And what is squeezed out is the spiritual disciplines. What is squeezed out is time with God. What is squeezed out is opening our Bible. What is squeezed out is coming to church. What is squeezed out is fellowship with other believers. And you say, well, it's okay because I've got some rest. I've got a lie-in. I've got some rest. I've got a time going out in the evening with some friends or watching a film. Those are good things. But what I'm trying to differentiate is we also need rest for our souls. Our souls need to find rest in God. And that is the counter solution to busyness. To make sure our souls find rest in God. Let me close with this. Matthew 11, verses 28 to 30. This kind of brings it all together. This is Jesus talking, and he says this in Matthew 11. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and lean from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When we are yoked to Jesus, we find rest for our souls. You see, Jesus was talking to farmers. In this illustration, as he's talking, his discourse, he's talking to farmers. And they knew what he meant by a yoke. We might have thought, well, it's a harness to kind of get full maximum power from the beast as you plow. No. A yoke was a piece of wood shaped kind of something like that. And it was a tool to train young animals how to do the job. And you would attach the yoke, the piece of wood, around the neck of the older animal and around the neck of the younger animal. And as the older animal turned left, so the younger animal would turn left. And as the older animal turned right, so the younger animal would turn right. And the yoke would mean that the older animal would lead the younger animal and train and teach and be shown what was required. Jesus invites us to come to him, to be yoked to him, and to learn from him. And if I put it really, really bluntly, we have a choice whether we are yoked to busyness, and busyness calls the shots, or we are yoked to Jesus and we find rest for our souls. Am I yoked to busyness? Am I being robbed of the life that God has for me? Are my priorities being messed with? Is my perspective being messed with because I am yoked to busyness and I am taken wherever busyness wants me to go? Or am I yoked to Jesus? Do I find rest in my soul? Does he lead me and guide me and show me how to use my life to the most effectiveness? Does he show me what is important? Does he show me the priorities? Does he give me a right perspective? Does he remind me that he is Lord and on the throne? Does he show me that his purposes are true and faithful? We have a choice almost every day. Am I going to be yoked to busyness, or am I going to be yoked to Jesus? Jesus says to me, "Come to me, all you who are weary, find rest in me for your weary souls." Lay down your baggage, lay down your burdens. And you see beautifully at the cross where Jesus died at Calvary, he dealt once and for all with our sin and with our mess, so that if we put our faith and trust in Jesus, we may be able to have eternal rest in heaven. But there's a choice we have on this earth about whether we are yoked to busyness or we find rest for our souls in being yoked to Jesus. Whether we can find rest in the busyness of modern life. The choice is each one of us. The choice is a daily, ongoing choice. But remember, busyness robs you of so much. It robs you of peace and joy. It robs you of empathy. It robs you of focus. Jesus gives us so much. Rest for our souls. Perspective on life. A refuge in times of trouble. A clarity about the purpose for our lives. To use our gifts, to use our talents. To prioritize what really matters in life. In everyday modern life, we have a choice. I don't want to do what I don't want to do. I don't want to live a busy life. Try as you will to push busyness out, it will keep tumbling back in. The only way is to replace it with rest. Rest for your soul. Rest that is found in Jesus. Rest by being yoked daily to Jesus Christ. Band, if you could come up.